Presidential candidate and U.S. Representative Ron Paul delivering a keynote address to students at the Young Americans for Liberty National Convention. The organization was created after Ron Paul's 2008 presidential campaign. It's a self-described conservative and libertarian youth organization, and its aim is to educate and mobilize students on college campuses who are committed to its principles. Following his remarks, he answered a few questions from students. The event was held at George Mason University in Arlington, Virginia. It's about 50 minutes.
Whoa, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very nice. This is why I come to all these events with young people. You have a lot of enthusiasm. That's great, wonderful. But you're enthusiastic for the cause of liberty. That's what makes me excited. You know, it's been several years since I ran for the presidency in 07 and 08, but as a consequence of that, with the youth movement in that campaign, that Jeff got the idea of having YAL, which I strongly encouraged him to do, and it's been magnificent on what he has accomplished. I mean, to bring you together and just think of the many hundreds, if not thousands, of students now on campuses, and that is where the revolution is. It's on your campus. Lately, the interviews I've been getting, it's always politics, you know, this guy against this guy, Republicans against the Democrats, and all this stuff. And I'd sort of like to get away from some of that politicking all the time. And they say, yeah, but what about all that gridlock in Washington? How are you going to break up that gridlock if you don't get these parties to work together? I said, our main problem in this country is for too long we've had not enough gridlock. We need more gridlock. Now, if they were passing the right things, which would mean that there would be a limitation on new laws, that they were only be allowed to improve our country by the repealing of laws, then you don't want gridlock. Just let them get in there and start repealing. But the gridlock is a natural consequence of a system that has failed, and I think that's what so many of you have recognized, that the system hasn't worked, and the political system is a real mess, and they're not willing to face up to the truth. Matter of fact, they're not willing to step up to face the truth, but when you hear the truth, they accuse the person who's telling you the truth of a man that's committing treason. I would say, this is what you should be most concerned about, getting the truth about our government and making sure our government protects our privacy. You know, there's been a lot of move on in local government and state and federal government. There's cameras, you know, cameras everywhere. Everything you do. Not only the cameras, of course, NSA can spy on everything without a camera. And but there are too many cameras. So does that mean we should be against cameras? No, we shouldn't be against cameras. But we should be against the government having the cameras. We want the people have the cameras taking pictures of everything the government is doing, and that would be much better. But you could apply that same rule on guns. You know, I want gun control, but I want to take the guns away from those over 100,000 bureaucrats who carry guns enforcing federal laws. They don't need the gun. Police activity was supposed to always be local, but here we are passing laws endlessly, with bureaucrats carrying guns to enforce these laws. But that's going to have to change, and I think it is. And I think what we're witnessing here in a group like this and what's happening on the campuses of the country, there is truly a revolution of ideas. It's going to be a nonviolent revolution, but we're going to stand up on principle, and we have an idea whose time has come, and nobody's going to stop it. Victor Hugo was the one that had the quote about an idea whose time has come and cannot be stopped by armies. But I think that is absolutely true. And it's especially true since we have a secret weapon which is no longer secret, which can be an enemy and a tool for the opposition, but it's a great tool for us. And that's the benefit of the internet that we have today. There's another reason why the revolution is alive and well and is going to continue to grow. It's out of necessity. It's good to have an academic discussion, which many of us have been trying to get going for 40 or 50 years, and there's been always a small group. There's always a remnant. Thank goodness the remnant is growing right now. And it is something that I think that what is happening now is your age group and others, the country maybe, and maybe this is the reason that the Congress is given a 12% favorable rating, is that everybody is starting to realize the failure of this trials and errors in foreign policy and economic policy, their confusion on civil liberties, and they're saying enough is enough. We've tried all the statism and all the varieties of statism all the way back to the pharaohs. It's time we had something, really modern. And that is individual liberty, protecting your right to your life and to the fruits of all your labors. And the magnificent thing about the revolution that's going on is it's not divisive. Politics in Washington is very divisive. You have conservatives over here and liberals over here. All of them like war, but one wants to go into this country, the other one wants to go in this other country, and they'll be arguing over monetary policy. Should we have interest rates at 1% or minus 1%? All that nonsense. And now that the failure is very evident, I think the opportunity is just fantastic. And that is to present the case for liberty. And when you think about it, it should bring us all together, because liberty, the cause of liberty and the purpose of our liberty may be used differently. Each and every one of us might use it differently. We're not all going to spend our money the same. We're not all want to go to the same school, the same place, or we don't want to go to the same church. We want to make our own pickings. If you don't want to go to church, you don't have to. All these things are personal choices. And socially, there should be choices. And you say, oh, no, well, the liberals say, oh, you can't do that. Then there's somebody that might be poor and another person rich, and therefore we have to have economic equality. That should be the goal. Well, that's a good way to have equality or poverty. So making it so that this is the real free choice in that we should be talking about, the choice about how to run your life. And people will also say, well, economic liberty is one thing, but what about this personal liberty? You mean what, lifestyles? We're not going to tell people how to behave? Well, the truth is, vices and sins are not to be crimes. They're to be dealt with. You as a person, you have to decide what you're going to make of your life. You're going to ultimately make all those decisions, not the government. And it could be family is involved. But once the government gets involved in all this economic equality stuff and this personal liberty stuff, that we're going to make sure that you are socially and morally, the right person, it cannot be done without government becoming a tyrant. And that is what is happening. They believe, you take a guy, the ultimate of this would be the mayor of New York City. They believe that they are necessary to protect you against yourself because you might do something dumb. And you know what? There's a possibility that every one of us might do something dumb. But in a free society, you're going to be responsible for everything that you do, and you should suffer the consequences. But if you elect leaders, so-called leaders, who go to Washington or State House and do all these things and say, oh, we want you to be a leader, tell us what is good and bad, should we gamble, we not gamble, and all these things, and tell us how to handle our money. If we do this, if a government is allowed to do this, or even attempt to do it, because they can't do it without taking away your freedom. So liberty has to be the goal, personal liberty. And you know, there was another group, it was, I think it was called Young Americans, it was named, Bill Buckley had a name. I like the fact that Jeff calls it Young Americans for Liberty. That is what's wonderful. But we should be optimistic about what's happening, not only because of what's happening on the college campuses, the educational movements going on in the 50s and the 60s. Let me tell you, I was curious, and I think that's why probably almost every one of you are here. You've been curious. You're curious about economics and politics and how the world works and what's going to happen in the future. Am I going to have a job? All these things. You're curious. A lot of people aren't curious. And I think if you're curious, it's a blessing. And once you're curious and you sort this out and come up with answers, you actually end up with more obligations. Because most people aren't curious and most people don't care and most people never get involved. But if you've been curious enough to come here and get the tidbits of what a free society is all about, I believe there's more responsibility placed on you to do something about it. Because the others will always be floating. But in the 50s and the 60s, I became curious, and I didn't realize at the time I should be very grateful that I had a curious mind on economics and everything that I was doing. But the one thing that we came up short with in those times was the difficulty in getting the answers. I mean, we had 3 major TV networks, we had our schools, and we had our government. And it took me a while to find out that it was all propaganda. And now, today, you know, I did find the Foundation for Economic Education, the Fee Foundation by Leonard Read, and I was able to get a lot of books back then, you know, when I discovered that. But it wasn't easy. Today, if it's easier, if I'm sitting at my desk and I remember reading this book a long time ago and I knew I got it from Leonard Read, it's easier for me to click on the Google and I get my answer without even getting the book out. It is so easy. There's no excuse for not finding it. That doesn't mean everything you're going to read is the right thing to do, but you can figure it out if you have this basic principle of what liberty is about. And it's no more complicated than the non-aggression principle. You can't. I happen to work that in with my own personal religious beliefs because I think my Christian beliefs is that based on love and non-aggression and persuasion and love and peace rather than an argument for war and aggression and all these other things that we end up doing in the name of religion. But the non-aggression principle is basically you can't hurt other people, which means you can't hurt them bodily, and you can't take from them, you can't rob them, and you can't defraud them. And those rules are rather simple and clear. And it'd be nice, just think if everybody did that, I mean, we would have, you know, a perfect society, and that's not going to happen. But I tell you what, if you turn it over to the government, then it's going to fail. I think you're living in an age where there is a transition where something could be changed historically like never before. If you go back to the beginning of recorded history 5,000 years ago, the human race has been fighting and killing each other and for a long, long time. And every time there was an advancement, every time there was a technological advancement, it was used to kill more people. You know, you get jet airplanes. Oh, yeah, we can kill more people. We get bigger bombs. And it continues to go on to killing people. But we live in an age where there's no reason why us not to think that technology can be used by us to promote the cause of liberty through the use of the internet. I think that would be a real miracle. The failure of the system is out there. It's known, and the frustration of the people very high. The opportunity with the internet and the need for something, I think, is out there. So the success of organizations like Young Americans for Liberty is crucial. I mean, it is vital. And it's been written on the internet very often, and I truly believe it. If there is going to be a true revolution, a philosophic revolution, yes, there may be some of those people over 30 that might be able to give you a little advice now and then. But the revolution will be with young people, and it has to have music. And I think the music is great. We always had it in our campaign. Just sometimes not quite so loud. And for me, this, I think it's wonderful. A lot of people say, well, you really energize the young people. But I'll tell you what, because of the response I get from young people and the enthusiasm, the interest, the willingness to have an open mind, where I've worked with a few people in Washington, they don't have open minds. So just the idea that you're willing to look at this and separate this away from partisan bickering that goes on, and the willingness to see this in a much more philosophic manner. I frequently use the analogy of what Richard Nixon said when he closed the gold window and ushered in the age of the biggest fiat boondoggle ever in the history of mankind, and that is the paper dollar standard, which we're still suffering from, and the real suffering is yet to come. But he announced on that night, a Sunday night, it was August 15th in 1971, I remember it clearly, he says, we're all Keynesians now. Which was significant, because he was saying that at that time, and still some people think, well, it's only the Democrats or Keynesians, they're liberals, they believe in the spending and the debt. But what has happened since the 1970s? And every time, we get a Republican president in, oh yes, and they talk and say some of the things that you like, but they end up spending all the money. They end up, the Republicans and Democrats, they spend the money, they run up the debt, they print the money, they endorse the Fed, they endorse the wars, and that has to be separated out. So we want to see the day come, we're not Keynesians anymore. We're all Austrian economists from now on. And we have solutions which aren't complex. People say, well, to get us out of this mess, we're in a real economic mess, and we are. And we should have allowed liquidation to occur and the bankruptcies to roll, and in 2 years, this mess would have been over. And instead, they just rolled up all this debt and spending, and a greater burden on you is what has happened. This is solved in a way of moving in the opposite direction. And people say, oh, that means, if you don't do that, there's going to be a lot of sacrifice. We all have to sacrifice. You've heard that. Everybody has to sacrifice and give up something. Not if you are earning it. If you're living off somebody else, if you're a banker, and depending on the fractional reserve banking and the Federal Reserve to give you free money, if you're in the military industrial complex, or if you're in the medical industrial complex, or the surveillance industrial complex, yes, you're going to suffer, and we want you to suffer, because that's ill-gotten gain. But if I come to you and I have the wand, and I offered the wand, I didn't quite get it, but the wand would be just to give you your freedom, just to give you your right to your life, and show that it's a God-given, natural right, that it's your life, and you ought to be able to keep the fruits of your own labor. And if that is the case, why would you be sacrificing? What would you be sacrificing if you could be just left alone to your own privacy, work hard, and keep everything you earn? That wouldn't be a sacrifice as far as I'm concerned. It would be a blessing. It would energize everybody, because they're not going to be living off somebody else. Now, so far, our country has been so wealthy that there's not been much incentive. And in a way, freedom was our own worst enemy, economically speaking, because freedom created such great wealth that a lot of people were able to just transfer the wealth around. It became politicized, and there were special interest groups all over the place. So they endorsed the principle of wealth transfer, and then also they've endorsed recently the idea that we have to tell the rest of the world what to do. But it's different now. We're no longer a rich country. We have debt. And that is the big difference. But I don't look at it as sacrifice. Liquidation of debt means that the people who caused the problem are going to have to change their way. But what has happened in the bailout, the burden has fallen on you. Future debt, inflation that's going on, cost of your education going on, no jobs. This is a consequence, so you suffer from that. But for the government to get out of the way, you're not, you shouldn't be suffering. And I never want to think that freedom is something to do with sacrificing. Does it mean that that will answer all our problems? No, it won't. But it will mean that there'll be a lot less and should be done differently. It should be done through charity and other methods. But this whole idea of humanitarianism, that if we take care of everybody and this government's job is to take care of us and make us safe and secure, we end up with a real mess. Nobody's really safe and nobody is very secure. So this is a transition that we're in, and you're going to see it because it cannot continue. We had the NASDAQ bubble. The Austrian economists knew about the NASDAQ bubble. They knew about the housing bubble. They knew about stock bubbles and all these things. They can see this. They might not be able to time it, but they can see it. And I'll tell you where the bubble is right now, and it has to do with debt, government debt, and especially treasury bills and treasury bonds, because there's no way in the world that we as a country can borrow endlessly for free and get people to buy our debt, spend money, print money, and spend it overseas, and they take the money and actually send it back to it and loan it. That will end. So the fact that interest rates are 0% for so many years means that the price of a bond is very, very high. And it seems like that's all that people want to do because they don't know where to put their money anymore. But that will end, and it will be cataclysmic. And a major decision will have to be made. You'll have to decide what kind of a foreign policy we're going to have. Do you think we should, allow presidents go to war when they please? Or do you think maybe the founders were right? Maybe we should do something really old-fashioned and don't go to war unless there's a declaration of war. That's the only time. And those are the things that you'll have to decide on. And you'll have to decide that Keynesian economics is a complete failure. It's nothing more than an excuse to expand the government, and they got away with it because free markets were so prosperous. But now, what comes when you have freedom and a sound currency, even in a relative sense, you have a huge middle class. America was always known to have the biggest middle class ever and the wealthiest middle class ever, but not anymore. Just look at the statistics on the unemployment, people on food stamps, 100 million people receiving some type of food assistance, and the inflation is still with us. So I would say that the results have been very, very poor. And we're in a situation where we're not producing either. We've created a situation where we don't produce our greatest exporter are our dollars. But this will come to an end. You'll have to do something. You will have to decide. I'll tell you what, if you get a little bit confused on exactly what we should do, when and how, you could start by saying, you know what would be a good start is why don't we just start right now, never send anybody to Washington unless you really believe they'll obey the Constitution. Of course, that's pretty radical, but if they're needing change, that's the kind of change, the change we want. But we have to change attitudes too. We have to change attitudes about this authority government has assumed. The executive branch is probably the most guilty because they assume so much power they don't really have. But who's at fault? Well, the Congress. The Congress either closes their eye or they finances the illegal wars and they do all these things. NSA gets set up. They rob us of our privacy and all this. But Congress says nothing. And hopefully this 12% rating they have is because the people want them to say something. But is it the Congress? Is it the politician? Is it the courts? I say yes, only because it's a consequence of what quite a few generations before you had been told what to believe and what to think, and that the Constitution was something that was supposed to be changeable and modernized and do whatever is practical, and monetary policy, gold is stupid, printing paper money is a wise thing to do, print money when you need it, deficits don't matter. So that is what has to be reversed. But the challenge is really overwhelming. But it will not come by saying we want to get as many good people in Washington as we can. But it's not going to, I don't think we have time to get 10 new members every year and finally start winning the votes. I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think it's going to get much worse. And that's why what you do for the rest of your life, starting right now, and you're already involved, is what are you going to do to contribute to the spread of this message? And the message is powerful. I've often wondered, how have we been such failure in promoting this wonderful message of peace and prosperity and tolerance? And we lose the fights all the time. We get a bunch of people telling us how we have to run our life, how we have to spend our money, and how when we go to war without any permission whatsoever. Just executive orders are being written. Courts